Well, this is Eric Michael Lloyd, and today I was going to read something about pedophilia and the DSM-5, the importance of clearly defining the nature of a pedophilic disorder. This is from the Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law. This is Volume 2, Issue 4. This one was published the 1st of December 2014. Psychiatric terminology should convey information in a clear and unambiguous as a manner as possible. In light of the associated stigma that is especially so of the terms pedophilia and pedophilic disorder, although from a psychiatric perspective, the term pedophilia is intended to define a recognized clinical entity. In the collective consciousness of contemporary society, the term has become a demonizing pejorative. Many in society are likely to equate pedophilia with child molestation. They are not the same. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, DSM-5, may be contributing inadvertently to the misconception that they are the same for the following three reasons. First, DSM-5 states that an indicator of a pedophilic disorder would be that an individual has acted on his sexual urges. Reference 1, page 697. Acted on could mean that he has actually molested a child. On the other hand, it could also mean that he has masturbated to pedophilic fantasies or that he has viewed child pornography. The current criteria for diagnosing a pedophilic disorder place some persons who have never molested a child into the same diagnostic category as those who have done so. That could cause confusion, suggesting that the current definition of a pedophilic disorder may lack adequate diagnostic specificity. As a consequence, the distinction between being sexually attracted to children in some fashion, for example, experiencing urges to view child pornography, and experiencing urges to act on that attraction with a child can easily be lost. Now, about that first part, I knew there was something that was missing on that first paragraph. The actual definition, part B, for that definition of pedophilic disorder, states or that the individual has had significant disturbances in daily life or areas of importance, work, social life, and relationships. So that's the part that first paragraph might be missing. But I can see how some people may be inadvertently confused if they don't get the definition from the DSM down packed. Back to the article. Second, at present, in discussing pedophilia, DSM-5 makes reference to the term pedophilic sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is ordinarily used to designate the category or categories of persons whom a given individual finds to be sexually appealing. Those who are heterosexually oriented are sexually attracted to adults of the opposite sex. Those who are homosexual to adults of the same sex. Men with heterosexual pedophilic orientation to prepubescent females, and men with a homosexual pedophilic orientation to prepubescent boys. In the face of significant criticism of its inclusion in the DSM-5, the American Psychiatric Association, APA, has stated its intention to remove the term pedophilic sexual orientation from the diagnostic manual. Moving that term in response to public criticism would be a mistake. Experiencing ongoing sexual attractions to prepubescent children is, in essence, a form of sexual orientation, and acknowledging that reality can help to distinguish the mental makeup that is inherent to pedophilia from acts of child sexual abuse. So I hope that distinction is what that article is trying to parse out. I hope that distinction is better understood. Third, in discussing the nature of pedophilic disorder, DSM-5 has done little to characterize the multitude of psychiatric burdens associated with the condition, burdens that are frequently present, even in the absence of any acts of child sexual abuse. Next part, viewing child pornography. Viewing child pornography should not be considered a useful diagnostic indicator of pedophilic disorder. You know that. DSM-5 states that the extensive use of pornography depicting prepubescent children is a useful diagnostic indicator of pedophilic disorder. Reference 1, page 698. Any diagnosis simply constitutes a way of conveying information in shorthand. For example, when a diagnosis of diabetes, schizophrenia, or anorexia nervosa is made, that diagnosis conveys a great deal of useful information to a properly trained physician. For that reason, it is critical that the information conveyed not be misleading, particularly in a forensic setting. Under current circumstances, a diagnosis of pedophilic disorder can infer a risk of hands-on offending with children. If the diagnosis is made largely on the basis of the use of child pornography, the inference may be inaccurate, with potentially unwarranted negative consequences for the individual. There are two ways of trying to determine whether those who have viewed child pornography pose a risk of hands-on offenses with children. One way is statistical, and the other clinical. From both a clinical and actuarial statistical perspective, an early retrospective study conducted at the Federal Civil Commitment Facility in Butner, North Carolina, inferred an association between accessing child pornography and hands-on sexual offending. Yep. Okay. I'll call her right back. That study has been criticized regarding its methodology and lack of scientific rigor. The recent prospective data have questioned the contention that there is a correlation between accessing child pornography and hands-on offending. For example, one such study found that less than 1% of 231 men who had viewed child pornography, but with no evidence of prior hands-on sexual offense, had gone on to commit a hands-on sexual offense. From a purely statistical standpoint, all else being equal, individuals with no history of hands-on sexual offense against a child, but who have accessed child pornography, are at low risk as a group of committing a hands-on sexual offense in the future. 1% of 231 men who accessed child pornography. From a forensic clinical perspective, as opposed to an actuarial perspective, it is important to be aware that when individuals are investigated by criminal justice authorities for having allegedly accessed child pornography, their computers and their electronic devices are routinely confiscated. That enables investigators to ascertain whether attempts have been made to enter chat rooms that cater to children and whether an electronic device has been used to try to entice a child. In many instances, youngsters within the home of the suspect may have been questioned by child protective services and deemed not to have been abused. There may have been media publicity with no children having come forward alleging sexual abuse. These matters can and should be assessed when performing a forensic evaluation. Diagnosing a pedophilic disorder in the absence of credible forensic and or clinical evidence of an attempt to engage a child sexually could mistakenly infer that such contracts with a child had occurred or that they were likely to occur. For that reason, one should not ordinarily diagnose a pedophilic disorder in the case of individuals who have viewed child pornography but who have no known history of child molestation. DSM-5 includes a diagnostic category labeled Other Specified Paraphilic Disorder. In the absence of evidence of any prior attempts to approach a child sexually, and assuming the criteria to diagnose a paraphilic disorder are present, one could achieve diagnostic specificity by making that diagnosis in the case of individuals who have viewed child pornography. The primary components of that diagnosis would be pedophilia and voyeurism, with the added specifier that pedophilic acts have been limited to the voyeuristic viewing of child pornography. Such a diagnosis would convey information on a clear and unambiguous fashion, clinically as opposed to forensically, making distinctions between fantasies, example, voyeuristic fantasies, and real-life intentions is frequently not difficult. Many men in therapy have acknowledged feeling sexually aroused by images depicting rape, and some women have acknowledged being sexually aroused by fantasies of being raped. That does not mean that most such men are likely to become rapists or that most such women actually want to become rape victims. With the advent of the internet, distinguishing between private fantasies and public intentions constitutes an ongoing forensic concern. Even though viewing sexualized images of children is illegal, privately viewing such images and fantasizing about them does not necessarily reflect a real-life intent or interest in being sexual with a child. Pedophilia as a sexual orientation. DSM-5 did not err in referring to pedophilia as a sexual orientation. In diagnosing any psychiatric disorder, including a pedophilic disorder, ordinarily the intent is to guide patient care, management, and research. In discussing the diagnostic features of individuals who are sexually attracted to prepubescent children, DSM-5 notes that some could be said to have a pedophilic sexual orientation. The term sexual orientation ordinarily reflects an individual's subjective awareness of the category or categories of persons toward whom he or she is erotically attracted. Clinically, there are individuals, many of whom are described as having pedophilia, who report a subjective awareness of being erotically attracted, either exclusively or in part, toward a category of individuals comprised of prepubescent children. Many report experiencing those attractions as unchosen in a fashion that stems very much like an orientation. that such attractions are often unwanted does not alter their resemblance to an orientation. In expressing its intent to remove the phrase pedophilic sexual orientation from the DSM-5 discussion of pedophilia, the APA press release stated, in part, APA stands firmly behind efforts to criminally prosecute those who sexually abuse and exploit children and adolescents. We also support continued efforts to develop treatments for those with a pedophilic disorder with the goal of preventing future acts of abuse. Without question, the protection of children should be a priority both for society and for the psychiatric profession. The APA statement says nothing about why persons diagnosed with pedophilic disorder need or deserve treatment in their own right, or about why, except for the disturbing consequences of acting upon pedophilic urges, pedophilia should not be thought of as an orientation. The APA was correct in supporting a criminal justice component to the serious matter of child sexual abuse. The extent that pedophilic urges and fantasies cannot be either punished or legislated away, the APA was also correct in publicly supporting the need for effective psychiatric treatment for individuals who have pedophilic disorder. Publicly acknowledging pedophilia as a sexual orientation can be distinguished from a criminal mindset, might also have been useful. Distinguishing psychiatric and criminal implications. DSM-5 does not adequately assist in distinguishing the psychiatric aspects of a pedophilic disorder from its potential criminal implications. Given the common misconception that pedophilia is synonymous with child sexual abuse, DSM-5 has done little to define and characterize a pedophilic disorder as a psychiatric condition in its own right, independent of its potential criminal implications. DSM-5 has properly concluded that experiencing a recurrent sexual attraction toward children does not by itself constitute evidence of a disorder, unless those attractions also cause some distress or some other significant difficulties. At the same time, experiencing pedophilic attractions can create a significant psychiatric burden and, in some cases, can make it very difficult to maintain full and consistent self-control. In supporting the involuntary civil commitment and need for treatment of some individuals diagnosed with a pedophilic disorder, the United States Supreme Court used the presence of such a difficulty in self-control to justify civil commitment. In fact, the decision went so far as to limit persons eligible for civil commitment to those who were not able to control their sexual criminal acts. If the criminal justice system is acknowledging, as it seems to be, that having a pedophilic disorder can sometimes make it difficult to maintain proper self-control, why has the DSM failed to address that psychiatrically relevant question? The point here is not to argue that diagnostically related issues should be guided by legislative intent or by judicial decisions. It is simply to suggest that DSM-5 could have at least noted that some persons with pedophilic disorder may need treatment, because it can sometimes be difficult to maintain consistent behavioral control without it. Behaviors enacted by persons with a pedophilic disorder are energized by a powerful biological force, sex drive. Behaviors that are engaged by powerful biological cravings, whether such cravings are for heroin, alcohol, or cocaine, or for some unacceptable form of sexual activity, can be difficult to resist. sometimes necessitating psychiatric assistance. The psychiatric burden can be especially difficult for individuals who are sexually attractive exclusively to children because, for good reason, society must prohibit them from having sexual contact with any and all members of the category of persons whom they find to be sexually appealing. Having to go through life under such circumstances can be both challenging and distressing. Recently, an organization called Before You Act conducted an anonymous internet survey designed to obtain information from persons who feel sexually attracted to prepubescent children. 193 individuals from a variety of countries and ranging in age from 15 to 70 responded to that survey. That survey found that more than 66% of persons who had experienced enduring attractions to much younger children have been aware of such feelings before age 18. It's almost two-thirds. 26% of those surveyed had thought of committing suicide at some point in their lives, almost a quarter, and 41% of those who had considered it had done so before age 18. Clearly, this is a population in need of mental health care, and 40% of respondents had expressed an interest in receiving it. 40%. I think that parallels just about the stats that about the amount of people that seek treatment, anywhere from 25 to 40%, at least in the United States, for any mental health concerns. Some survey respondents had made commitments pertinent to appreciating the stress that can be associated with pedophilia. For example, one stated, "I'm a 15-year-old male. I'm not attracted to anyone my age or older anymore. I'm only attracted to prepubescent girls. I feel like there is no hope for me to live, and sometimes I feel like killing myself. I know the idea of a psychologist and everything, but I can't talk to anyone at this time because my parents would find out and get the wrong idea, and people would judge me and think I really want to hurt little kids." Another said, "I want to have sex with children all the time, but I know I cannot and will not because it will ruin that child's life, and it will do the same for mine. I look at pictures all the time. That helps me to deal with my desires without actually going out and having sex with young children." Yet another stated, "Parents will disown you. Teachers will report you. Friends will abandon you. People in my situation can't discuss this without serious risk of prosecution and or harassment." Some of those wanting help may have mistakenly believed that mandatory reporting statutes would require that criminal justice authorities be notified, even if they had never approached a child sexually. In discussing the diagnostic features of a pedophilic disorder, DSM-5 states that the presence of multiple victims is sufficient but not necessary for the diagnosis. Reference 1, page 698. I have to read that again. Look up that information. Once again, in emphasizing the possible, though certainly not inevitable, criminal implications of a pedophilic disorder, the DSM says little about why persons with this very stigmatized and often misunderstood condition need and deserve psychiatric help. DSM-5 has placed insufficient emphasis on the psychiatric burdens of a pedophilic disorder that justify its inclusion in the DSM, even in the absence of any criminal misconduct. As a profession that bridges the gap between scientific medical communities and the criminal justice system, forensic psychiatry has both the opportunity and the obligation to further clarify these important matters. Even in the absence of any criminal misconduct. So, like I was saying in the beginning, the DSM-5, if you read the definition carefully, I don't think that there's any confusion because of that part that says that this part where it says even in the absence of any criminal misconduct, that part doesn't apply because the definition, section B of the definition states that they may have acted or have had significant distress in their daily lives, something to that effect. So it's the either or part that's missing from this interpretation. But either way, this has very good information in it, helpful information, and I hope this assists in understanding and awareness for anyone who might be listening. Thank you.